I wake up to the same silence every morning now. The house doesn't creak the way it used to. No footsteps in the hall, no coffee maker beeping in the kitchen. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint whistle of wind through the window I never fixed after he left. I turned 72 last April. My daughter did not call. My son sent a text with a balloon emoji. My granddaughter posted a blurry photo of me on her Instagram story with no caption. That is what my life became, a slow, quiet erasure. But I need to start earlier. I need to start when I still believed in all of them. I was 68 when the first crack appeared. That is not true. The first crack appeared 40 years before that. I just did not see it because I was busy raising children and keeping a house and pretending my marriage was something other than a cold arrangement between two people who had stopped touching. But let me begin with the morning that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in October. The air in Houston was finally breaking after a long summer. I remember because I had the windows open for the first time in months. I was making breakfast for my grandson Leo. He was 6 then, curly hair, big brown eyes that looked exactly like his mother when she was small. I had been watching him 3 days a week for 2 years while my daughter Claire worked. She said she could not afford daycare. She said she trusted no one else. She said I was the only person in the world who loved Leo the right way. Those words, I lived on those words. I made him scrambled eggs with cheese the way he liked, cut his toast into triangles, poured orange juice into the little cup with the giraffe on it. He sat at my kitchen table swinging his legs, telling me about a dream he had where a dinosaur ate his school bus. I laughed. I kissed the top of his head. I thought to myself, this is what I worked for. This is why I stayed married to Richard for 43 years. This is why I put my own dreams in a box and buried them in the backyard. This little boy, this kitchen, this morning light. Claire was supposed to pick him up at noon. She had a dentist appointment. That was what she told me the night before. A cleaning, nothing serious. But at 11:15, my phone rang. I saw her name on the screen and I smiled, because I still smiled when I saw her name back then. She said, "Mom, something came up. Can you keep him until 3?" I said, "Of course, baby." She said, "You are a lifesaver." She said, "I do not know what I would do without you." She said those words so easily, like they cost her nothing. I told her Leo and I were going to build a fort in the living room. She laughed. She said, "You are the best grandmother in the world." I hung up. I felt full. I felt useful. I felt like a woman who mattered. The afternoon was beautiful. Leo and I built the fort out of blankets and kitchen chairs. We read Green Eggs and Ham 3 times. He fell asleep on my chest while I watched a courtroom show with the volume low. That was my life. Small moments stacked on top of each other. Nothing dramatic, nothing glamorous. Just a grandmother in a suburban house with a sleeping child on her shoulder. I thought that was enough. I thought that was love. But at 4 o'clock, Claire still had not come. Then 4:30, then 5. I texted her. No response. I called. It went straight to voicemail. Leo woke up hungry, so I made him a peanut butter sandwich. I cut up an apple. I started to feel something cold in my stomach. Not panic yet, just a quiet unease, the kind you push down because you do not want to seem dramatic. I told myself she was stuck in traffic. I told myself her phone died. I told myself I was being that mother, the one who worries about nothing. At 6:15, she walked through the door. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before, black, short. Her hair was different, blonder than it had been that morning. Her makeup was heavy. She smelled like perfume and something else, something sharp and sweet that I later learned was vodka. She smiled at me, but the smile did not reach her eyes. She said, "Sorry, Mom, lost track of time." I held Leo's backpack in my hands. I said, "Where were you?" She said, "I told you, dentist." I said, "For 6 hours?" She looked at me then, a long, flat look, the kind you give a stranger who asks too many questions. She said, "I am an adult, Mom. I do not have to account for every minute." That was the first time she spoke to me like that. Not like a daughter, like a woman who was already done with me. I handed her Leo's bag. I kissed his head. I said goodbye, and I closed the door, and I stood in my own kitchen feeling like I had just been dismissed from a job I never applied for. Richard came home at 8. He walked past me without a word, went to the refrigerator, poured himself a glass of wine, sat in his recliner, and turned on the news. That was our marriage for the last 15 years. Two ghosts sharing a mortgage. I used to try. I used to say, "How was your day?" I used to touch his shoulder. But somewhere along the way, I stopped, because he never answered and he never leaned into my hand. So we just existed next to each other, two old people waiting for something. I did not know then that he was waiting for me to die. Let me tell you about my son, Michael, 38 years old, married to a woman named Priya, who was born in Ohio but told everyone she had Indian heritage because she thought it made her interesting. Michael was my firstborn. He came out screaming and did not stop for 3 years. He was a difficult child, angry, demanding, but I loved him with a ferocity that scared me. I protected him from everything: bad teachers, bullies, his own father's indifference. I went to every parent-teacher conference. I stayed up with him when he had nightmares. I paid for his college tuition by working nights as a medical coder while Richard slept. I gave Michael everything, and Michael grew into a man who called me twice a year, once on Mother's Day, once on my birthday. The calls lasted 4 minutes each. I timed them. Priya was worse. She treated me like a delivery service that had already made its last drop. She would text me photos of the kids, my granddaughters, Ella and Sophie, but only on holidays, only when she needed something. She never asked how I was, never came to visit. When I had my knee replacement surgery 2 years ago, she sent a get-well card from the grocery store, the kind you buy for a coworker you barely know. Michael did not come to the hospital. He said he had a work deadline. I believed him because I had spent 68 years believing the men in my life. The betrayal did not happen all at once. It happened in drips. A forgotten birthday here, a canceled dinner there, a text message left unread. But I was a mother. Mothers do not keep score. Mothers forgive. Mothers say, "It is okay. I understand you are busy." I said that so many times, the words lost all meaning. I said it when Claire forgot to pick me up for my own colonoscopy. I said it when Michael promised to fix my leaky faucet and never showed. I said it when Richard told me he was too tired to take me to my oncology appointment. The lump in my breast was benign, but he did not know that because he did not ask. The real unraveling started 6 months after that Tuesday in October. Leo had just turned 7. Claire threw him a party at one of those indoor playground places with the ball pits and the pizza. I drove myself, even though my eyes were starting to get bad at night. I brought a gift, a Lego set I had saved for weeks to buy. I wrapped it myself in blue paper with little rocket ships on it. When I walked in, Claire was standing by the snack table with a man I had never seen before. He was younger, maybe 40, tan, wearing a suit jacket over a t-shirt. He had his hand on the small of her back. Proprietary, familiar. I walked over. I said hello. Claire looked at me like she had just remembered I existed. She said, "Mom, this is Derek. Derek, this is my mother." Derek stuck out his hand. He had a firm shake. Too firm. The kind of shake that says, "I am in charge of this interaction." He said, "Claire has told me so much about you." I said, "Has she?" He smiled. A white smile. A smile that had been practiced in a mirror. I looked at Claire. Her wedding ring was gone. I noticed it then. The pale stripe on her finger where the gold band used to sit. I said, "Where is Mark?" Mark was her husband, the father of Leo, a quiet man who worked in logistics and loved his son more than anything. Claire said, "We separated 3 months ago." She said it like she was telling me the weather, like it was nothing, like she had not hidden it from me for 90 days. I said, "Why did you not tell me?" She shrugged. She said, "I did not want to worry you." That phrase, "I did not want to worry you." It is the phrase adult children use when they mean, "I did not want to hear your opinion." I stood there in a room full of screaming children and sticky paper plates, and I realized my daughter had stopped confiding in me years ago. I just never noticed. Derek talked to me for 10 minutes, told me he was a real estate investor, told me he had just sold a duplex in Austin for a ridiculous profit, told me he admired older women because they had wisdom. That word, wisdom. When a man like that calls you wise, what he really means is he thinks you are old and harmless. I smiled. I nodded. I watched him put his hand on Claire's hip. I watched her lean into him. And I thought about Mark, the man who cried when Leo was born, the man who fixed my garbage disposal on a Sunday afternoon because he said family helps family, the man my daughter had thrown away for a suit jacket and a fake tan. Leo ran up to me. His face was red from running.
He said, "Grandma, look, I got a prize from the claw machine." It was a small stuffed bear with one eye missing. I said, "It is beautiful, baby." I hugged him. I held on too long. He wiggled away. He ran back to the ball pit. Claire touched my arm. She said, "Can I talk to you about something later?" I said, "Of course." She said, "Not here. Maybe next week. I will come to your house." I said, "Okay, baby." But I knew. In my gut, I knew she was not coming to see me. She was coming to ask for something. She came on a Wednesday. Richard was at work. The house was quiet.
I made a pot of coffee, set out the good cups, the ones my mother gave me before she died. Claire arrived 45 minutes late, without an apology. She sat at my kitchen table. She looked at me with eyes that were soft in a way I had not seen in years. She said, "Mom, I need to ask you something." I said, "Okay." She said, "Derek and I want to buy a house together, a fixer-upper, something we can flip, but we need capital." I said, "How much?" She said, $80,000. I had $83,000 in savings. That was it. That was every dollar I had saved since I started working at 16 years old. My retirement, my emergency fund, the money I planned to use if Richard left me, or if I got sick, or if the air conditioner died for the 5th time. I looked at my daughter, her soft eyes, her hand reaching across the table, her voice saying, "We will pay you back within a year. We will give you 20% interest." I said, "Let me think about it." She said, "Okay," but her face changed. The softness disappeared, replaced by something harder. She said, "You trust me, right, Mom?" I said, "Of course I trust you." She said, "Then what is there to think about?" That was the moment I should have said no. That was the moment I should have stood up and walked her to the door and told her that $80,000 was not a loan. It was my life. But I did not. Because I was a mother. Because I was a grandmother.
Because I was a woman who had spent 7 decades putting everyone else first, and I did not know how to stop. I said yes. The money left my account on a Friday. I drove to the bank myself, sat in a plastic chair while a young woman with kind eyes processed the wire transfer. She asked me if I was sure. I said yes. She said, "Would you like to add a memo?" I said no. I watched the number on my screen drop from 83,000 to 3,000. I felt lightheaded, but I told myself it was fine. It was fine. My daughter would pay me back. My daughter loved me. 3 weeks later, Richard sat me down in the living room. He had a piece of paper in his hand. His face was the same blank face he always wore, but there was something underneath it, something that looked almost like relief. He said, "I am leaving." I said, "What?" He said, "I met someone, a woman from work. She is 38. We have been together for 2 years." He said it so calmly, like he was telling me he was switching car insurance. I said, 2 years. He said, "Yes." I said, "While I was watching Leo? While I was making dinner? While I was sleeping next to you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Where will you go?" He said, "She has a condo in the Galleria area." He said, "I am filing for divorce." He said, "The house will have to be sold." He said, "The retirement accounts are half mine." He said all of it like he had rehearsed it in the car on the way home. I did not cry. I did not scream. I sat on the couch. I looked at the wedding photo on the wall, a photo of 2 young people who did not exist anymore. I said, "Okay." Richard stood up. He walked to the bedroom. He started packing. I heard him zipping suitcases. I heard him opening drawers. I sat perfectly still, alone of an empty house. The alone of a woman who had just learned that 43 years of her life was a transaction, not a love story. A transaction. He had stayed because I cooked and cleaned and raised his children and managed his appointments and smiled at his bosses at holiday parties. And the moment he found a younger model, he left, like I was a leased car with too many miles. I called Michael. He did not answer. I called Claire. She did not answer. I texted both of them. "Dad left. Please call me." 3 hours later, Michael texted back. "Sorry, Mom. Busy. Talk tomorrow." Claire never responded. I slept alone that night. I lay in the dark. I stared at the ceiling. I wondered what I had done wrong. That is what we do.
We women, we wonder what we did wrong, even when the answer is nothing, even when the answer is, we were too kind for too long. The next few months were a blur of lawyers and paperwork and sleepless nights. Richard moved fast, faster than I thought possible. He had already filed the divorce papers before he told me he was leaving. He had already met with a financial advisor. He had already protected his assets. I was playing catch-up from the start. My lawyer was a tired woman named Margaret who smelled like cigarettes and spoke in a monotone. She told me I would get half of the house, half of the retirement account. But the house had a reverse mortgage I did not know about. Richard had taken it out 2 years earlier without my signature. He had forged my name. Margaret said we could fight it, but it would cost $10,000 in legal fees. I did not have $10,000. Claire still had my $80,000. I had $3,000. $3,000 to my name at 69 years old. I called Claire. I said, I need the money back. She said, what money? I said, the $80,000. She said, Mom, I invested that in the house. The flip fell through. Derek lost it in a bad deal. I said, what do you mean lost it? She said, I mean it is gone. The money is gone. I am sorry. She said, sorry, the way you say sorry when you bump into someone at the grocery store. Then she changed the subject. She asked if I could watch Leo on Saturday because she had a brunch. A brunch? My daughter had stolen my retirement and she wanted me to watch her son so she could go to brunch. I said no. I said it quietly. She said, what? I said, I cannot watch Leo anymore. She said, Mom, are you serious? I said, I am serious. She said, you are punishing me because I made a bad investment. I said, I am not punishing you. I am broke. I need to find a job. She laughed. She said, good luck finding a job at your age. Then she hung up. That was the last real conversation I had with my daughter for a long time. She sent me angry texts after that, accusing me of abandoning Leo, accusing me of being selfish, accusing me of never loving her. I read every text. I did not respond. I could not respond, because every word she wrote felt like a knife, and I had no skin left to cut. I found a job at a dollar store, 20 hours a week, minimum wage. I stocked shelves and ran the register and smiled at customers who looked through me like I was furniture. The manager was a 22-year-old boy who called me by my first name and spoke to me slowly, like I might forget what he said by the time he finished the sentence. I took the bus to work because I could not afford gas. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because I could not afford anything else. I slept in the house that was no longer mine. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings because Richard stopped paying the mortgage. I had 30 days to leave the only home I had known for 31 years. I did not tell Michael any of this. He would not have cared. He had stopped returning my calls altogether. Priya blocked me on social media. I found out later that Michael told people I was toxic, that I was a narcissist, that I had ruined his childhood by being too controlling. I read that word, narcissist. I looked it up. It means someone who is obsessed with themselves. I spent 69 years making sure everyone else was fed and clothed and happy, and my son called me a narcissist because I asked him to call me back. The moving day was the worst day of my life. Worse than Richard leaving. Worse than Claire stealing my money. Because on moving day, I had to decide what mattered, what was worth keeping. I had 31 years of memories in that house. Baby photos, Christmas ornaments, handmade cards from Claire and Michael when they were small enough to believe I was a superhero, Leo's drawings on the refrigerator, the measuring marks on the doorframe where I tracked their height every birthday. I could not take any of it. The apartment was a one-bedroom on the second floor of a building that smelled like cigarette smoke and boiled cabbage. No elevator, no dishwasher, no space. I packed 2 suitcases, clothes, my mother's china cups, a photo album. That was it. Everything else went to Goodwill or the dumpster. I stood in the empty living room. The carpet had stains. The walls were scuffed. The afternoon light came through the windows the same way it always had. I said goodbye to a life I never really had. A life where I was loved. A life where I mattered. I locked the door. I left the keys under the mat like the bank told me to.
I walked to the bus stop. I did not look back. The apartment was a cage. A small cage with thin walls, and a neighbor who yelled at her television all night.
I slept on a mattress on the floor because I could not afford a bed frame. I hung my mother's cups on a nail above the sink. I put the photo album on the windowsill. I went to work. I came home. I watched the news. I went to sleep. That was my life. That is what it became. 3 months after I moved into the apartment, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. A woman's voice, professional. She said, "Am I speaking to Margaret Benson?" I said, "Yes." She said, "This is Detective Reyes from the Houston Police Department Financial Crimes Unit." She said, "We are investigating your former son-in-law, Derek Vance." She said, "We have reason to believe he was operating a fraudulent real estate scheme." She said, "Your daughter, Claire Vance, is also a person of interest." She asked if I had given them any money. I told her about the $80,000. There was a pause. She said, "Mrs. Benson, I am very sorry." She said, "Derek has been running this scheme for years, targeting elderly family members, parents, grandparents, stealing their retirement." She said, "We have identified 17 victims so far. The total is over $2 million. I sat on my mattress. I looked at the photo album on the windowsill. I said, "What about my daughter?" The detective said, "Your daughter was aware of the scheme. She helped recruit victims. She helped move the money." She said, "Claire is facing felony charges." I said, "Thank you for telling me." I hung up. I sat there for a long time. I did not cry. I felt something worse than sadness. I felt confirmation. The last tiny hope I had been holding on to. The hope that my daughter had made an honest mistake, that she still loved me, that somewhere underneath the cruelty and the lies, there was still the little girl who used to hold my hand in the grocery store. That hope died on that mattress. I buried it next to all the other hopes I had lost. Claire was arrested 2 weeks later. I saw it on the news. A grainy mugshot. She looked tired. She looked old. She looked like a stranger. Derek was arrested the same day. He tried to run. They caught him at the airport with a one-way ticket to Costa Rica. Leo went to live with Mark, his father, the man Claire had left. Mark called me after the arrest. He said, "You can see Leo whenever you want." He said, "You are his grandmother. Nothing changes that." I cried on the phone. For the first time in months, I cried. Not because I was sad, because someone had been kind to me. A man I had nothing to do with anymore. A man my daughter had discarded. He showed me more decency than my own children had shown me in years. Michael found out about Claire from the news. He drove to my apartment, the first time he had visited me in 2 years. He stood in my doorway. He looked at the mattress on the floor, the photo album, the cups on the nail. He said, "Mom, I am so sorry." I said, "For what?" He said, "For everything." I said, "You did not know." He said, "I should have known." I should have asked. I said, "Yes, you should have." He stayed for an hour. We talked about small things, his job, the girls. He showed me photos of Ella and Sophie on his phone. They had grown so much, I barely recognized them. He asked if he could help with money. I said no. He asked if I was sure. I said yes, because I did not want his guilt money. I wanted his love, and you cannot buy love at a bank. After he left, I sat in the dark. I thought about all the years I had given, all the meals I had cooked, all the fevers I had sat through, all the birthday parties I had planned, all the Christmas mornings I had made magical. I thought about Richard, about the way he used to look at me when we were young, before the indifference set in, before he found someone younger, someone who did not have stretch marks or arthritis, or a body that had carried 2 children. I thought about Claire, about the baby girl I had rocked to sleep 1,000 nights, about the teenager who told me I was her best friend, about the woman who stole my future and called it an investment. I thought about Michael, about the angry little boy who clung to my leg on his first day of kindergarten, about the man who called me 4 times a year and thought that was enough. I thought about forgiveness. Everyone talks about forgiveness like it is a gift you give yourself. Like if you just forgive the people who hurt you, then you will be free. But I do not feel free. I feel tired. I feel heavy. I feel like a woman who gave everything to people who were only pretending to love her. I am 72 years old now. I still work at the dollar store. I still ride the bus. I still eat peanut butter sandwiches. But something changed in me after the arrest, after the detective's call, after Michael stood in my doorway with his guilt and his photos and his too late apology. I stopped waiting. I stopped waiting for Richard to come back. I stopped waiting for Claire to apologize. I stopped waiting for Michael to call more often. I stopped waiting for my life to turn into the one I thought I had earned. I just started living. Small, quiet, alone, but mine. Leo comes to see me every other Saturday. Mark drops him off. Sometimes Mark stays for coffee. We talk about Leo's school, his friends, his favorite video games, normal things, things that do not hurt. Leo draws me pictures. He tapes them to my refrigerator. The refrigerator in my small apartment with the thin walls and the neighbor who yells at her television. The apartment I pay for with my own money for my own job. The apartment that does not have a white fence or a garden or a guest room, but it has a grandson who loves me. And for now, that is enough. Claire is still in prison. She will be for another 3 years. She writes me letters sometimes. Long letters full of "I am sorry" and "I was lost" and "I love you, Mom." I read every letter. I keep them in a shoebox under my bed. I do not write back. I do not know what I would say. Maybe someday, maybe not. Richard married the 38-year-old. They live in the Galleria area, in the condo she already had. I do not think about him anymore. That is a lie. I think about him every day. But the thinking is different now. It is not longing. It is not anger. It is just a fact, like knowing the sun will set, like knowing the bus will be late. He was a chapter, a long chapter, but chapters end. Michael calls me every Sunday now. We talk for 10 minutes, sometimes 15. He asks about my week. I ask about the girls. Priya still does not speak to me. That is fine. I do not need her. I do not need anyone who only gives me their leftover attention. I have learned that lesson. I have the scars to prove it. Margaret, the lawyer, called me last month. She said there might be a way to recover some of the money from Derek's assets. The court had frozen his accounts. There might be a settlement. She said it could be $20,000 or $30,000. She said it is not the full amount, but it is something. I said, okay. I said, thank you. I hung up. I looked at my bank balance on my phone. $312. $20,000 would feel like winning the lottery, but I am not excited. I learned not to get excited about money. Money comes, money goes. People come, people go. I am sitting in my apartment now. It is evening. The neighbor is yelling at her television. The light outside my window is orange and soft. I have a cup of tea. The cup is one of my mother's china cups, the only thing I have left from her. I am thinking about what I would tell you if you were sitting across from me. If we were in a dark room and you asked me what happened, I would tell you this. Love is not enough. I loved my husband for 43 years. I loved my daughter for 40 years. I loved my son for 38 years. And they still left. They still stole. They still chose themselves over me every single time. Love is not a contract. It is not a guarantee. It is just a feeling. And feelings change. People change. I changed. I used to be a woman who believed that if I gave enough, I would receive enough. That was a lie. The world does not work that way. The world takes from givers and gives to takers. That is the ugly truth I learned at 69 years old. But here is the other truth, the one I hold on to when the loneliness gets too loud. I am still here. I am still breathing. I still get on the bus and go to work and stock shelves and smile at customers who do not see me. I still make Leo scrambled eggs with cheese when he comes over. I still cut the toast into triangles. I still pour the orange juice into the cup with the giraffe on it. I saved that cup from the old house. It was in the back of a drawer. I took it with me. Some things you do not leave behind. I do not know how this story ends. It has not ended yet.
Maybe Claire will get out of prison and we will find a way to be in the same room again. Maybe Michael will finally introduce me to his wife's new baby. I heard she was pregnant. I heard it from a cousin. No one told me directly. Maybe Richard will die alone in that condo and I will feel nothing. Or maybe I will feel something. I do not know. What I know is this. I am 72 years old. I am broke. I am alone. But I am not broken. Not anymore. The breaking happened in that empty living room when I walked out the door for the last time. What came after was something else. Something harder. Something quieter. Something that does not need anyone else to survive. I finish my tea. I wash the cup in the sink. I dry it with a towel. I place it back on the nail above the sink. The apartment is dark now. The neighbor has stopped yelling. The silence is thick and heavy. I walk to my mattress on the floor. I lie down. I pull the blanket to my chin. I close my eyes. And I wait for morning. Because morning always comes. Even when you do not want it to. Even when you have nothing to wake up for. The sun rises anyway. And so do I.